Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining our session. My name is Joe. I run enterprise sales at TipRanks. TipRanks is a big financial data company, and we specialize in linguistic technology, machine learning, and, of course, the use of AI in synthesizing complex data sets into sound bites that are easily edible and digestible by retail investors to help them make smarter investment decisions. And we're integrated into some of the world's largest banks and brokers on online platforms. And it's my pleasure to have a panel here today of real industry experts. And I'll just like each one of them to introduce themselves, starting with David.
Hello, everybody. My name's David. I head up the engineering part of CMC Markets in their wealth division. And we're using AI mainly for some back office work and looking after our customers in particular ways, which I should hopefully talk about in a bit. No.
Hello, everyone. I'm Guy Hopkins from FairXchange. I'm the founder of FairXchange. I'm also head of capital markets at United Fintech, which is the parent of FairXchange. FairXchange is a data analytics company specializing in liquidity management and microstructural analysis. So we look at an awful lot of data, and we use machine learning and AI to help customers navigate that increasingly complex and increasingly large data set to be able to derive value from that.
Morning, everyone. I'm Ihar Marozau, Chief Architect at Capital, which is a CFD broker, and right now we're expanding to neo brokerage and neo banking space, integrating AI into application as well as internal processes.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rebecca Healy. I started my career 30 years ago doing electronic trading when it was not cool at Credit Suisse. And I went on to work for the UK government, Tab Group in New York, and I'm now working for myself. And I started writing about AI in trading a couple of years ago. And I conduct research and write a newsletter each week on the latest and greatest that's happening in AI, precisely because I think it's so interesting in how the industry is moving forward.
Great, thank you. So to start with, first question I think I'm going to pose to Guy, and the question is really about why are we all looking at AI, and why is it such a big theme, and what are the problems that AI is looking to address, and is AI a problem itself looking for a solution?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I mean, we should recognize that people have been doing stuff that comes within the purview of AI for a long time. You know, model-driven trading, algorithmic trading, machine learning. And these things are not new technologies. They are well established, and they're very good at what they do. Clearly, in the last few years, as suddenly everyone's talking about AI, and when they think about AI, generally they think about ChatGPT. They think about large language models and generative AI, and those are obviously super cool, amazing tools. I think people at the moment, particularly when it comes to financial markets, are trying to work out, particularly more in the kind of the quantitative end of the scale, how you can actually put these things to work in a way that's actually useful and doesn't cause you problems. So in some ways, as you say, a little bit kind of a solution looking for a problem. So like, how can we use kind of large language models? And there are a whole bunch of risks we can talk about later on, but I think that's what's kind of generated the huge amount of interest. But there is quite a lot of head scratching going on at the moment, thinking like, how can these things actually be deployed in the kind of the pointy end of kind of financial markets, particularly with quantitative data.
Thank you. Rebecca, I saw you nodding your head.
Well, no, I was just going to say it is that whole confusion about when people talk about AI, what do they actually mean? And you're right. I have viewed it more as an evolution of algorithmic trading. And it's just that next step on. I think where I see the need for AI, though, is because of the data deluge, and people can't make sense of all the information that's coming at them. So the best way that was described it to me is we're potentially moving into the world of what was described as like a headless EMS. So it's a blank screen, just like your phone is a screen, and you choose the apps that you want. So you choose the access to the information, which makes it much more customizable and personal to you. Now, the trick then is, how do you pick the right apps and how do you pick the right information? And to Guy's point, then you start looking at accuracy of data, portability of data. How do you make sure that you're getting the right information at the right time in the right place to be able to use it in the appropriate way?
Right. And Ihar, what are you thinking on the barriers, for example, and the complexity from an architectural perspective of actually integrating AI to make it, effective for the end user?
Yeah, obviously in trading, this is compliance problem because we must be compliant according to regulations, and AI at scale, specifically at scale, creates lots of issues for people to review their output, to review the flow itself, and so on and so forth. So that's why we invest a lot of time into approaches like LLM as a judge. So we use LLM to generate content, but as well as to review the content it generated. The other which is like a part of AI governance, to be honest. So AI governance is important. The other problem is data governance, because AI is good as your data. This is one. This is obvious as machine learning and the rest. But at the same time, it's when you expose it to clients, it can give them the answer, for instance, which is not relevant, or in the worst case, using other clients' data, which is like a breach, to be honest. So the data governance is important, and if your platform is not ready, the data platform, then I recommend to invest time into it. And obviously, like the research shows that 30% challenge of AI is in technology, and actually 70% challenge is in people. You need to convince people to use AI. You need to make them comfortable to using AI. You need to talk to regulators as well and explain your flows clearly so they understand. So if you're not able to measure your outputs, if you're not able to audit, if you're not able to explain your AI to regulators, you're not ready for production.
Great. And David, I saw you nodding away as well on the compliance and the regulatory aspects of AI from a system architect perspective. Maybe you could add to that.
Yeah, I was just thinking what Ihar was saying and trying to get people on board with it and inspire them to use it. That can almost go too far as well. You can have people that get excited by this technology and perhaps use it to fill the gaps in their knowledge that other experts around are probably better placed to fill. And it's enticing. It's this magical thing that can make you feel powerful. And you can use that to think that you're making progress, but without it being checked correctly by the experts, you can't explain why you've come to a particular conclusion on something.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's a massive issue. Because humans have this kind of natural tendency to fall into the trap of thinking, well, if the machine said it, the machine's right, therefore the output is right, and that is very, very rarely the case. These things are naturally contain all the biases that all the knowledge in the world that's been generated by humans contains. But there is a kind of an abdication of responsibility when people start to rely on these tools. They lose to a degree some of their critical thinking skills, and just kind of, oh, I'm just going to use AI to do this. And particularly in engineering, actually, that's really dangerous because people do need to understand, why does this thing do what it does? Don't just use coding assistants kind of tell you what to do. Just you need to understand the principles in order so you can check, is it doing it right?
So, Rebecca, what are some of the risk mitigations in terms of these dangers and aspects of people thinking that they understand more than they do, and perhaps becoming vulnerable to believing everything that they read from a prompt, etc.?
I think you could almost take it back a step further in that actually it all comes back down to the accuracy of data that you're looking at in the beginning. So if your building blocks aren't right, then you're just going to get nonsense coming out at the other end. I think if anything, AI has highlighted existing problems that were already in the industry and just made them bigger. So if I give you an example about how AI is being used by institutional asset managers, for example, they're starting to look at building models about how could they execute in the market. So instead of having something like TCA, which is your sort of trade confirm information, and looking at that historically, they're saying, I want that real time. And rather than using a broker to tell me how to trade, I want to create that execution pathway myself. Now, because the actual data that has been coming back from brokers has been open to a bit of interpretation by individual brokers. That has just happened over time. It's not anybody's fault. Essentially, a buy-side trader who was trying to build these models, it took him 6 months to decipher the data that was coming back in order to actually be able to start building an AI model. So it's not even where AI will take you going forward. I think it is an opportunity for the industry to actually step back, clean up its act, figure out where AI is useful in the next iteration of it. And that's why we need to start distinguishing when we're talking about machine learning, reinforced learning, when we're using a neural network, when we're actually using generative. And then you can start making people feel more comfortable with it. So an example of that would be, I am not using Gen AI when I'm actually hitting send to an order in the market. I am using Gen AI to give me lots of different options as to where I could potentially trade. But when it comes to the actual decision-making process, there is a human in the loop that owns that decision. And I think it's about the segregation of not putting all AI into one bucket and actually saying, what are we using AI for, in what capacity, and in what sector and what task?
I mean, maybe it'd be helpful to like think about a kind of an application here. So we provide a data analytics platform that customers log into, and they look at data and they look for answers to what's going on in our business. There is no way we would put an LLM in front of that to come up with some answers for a client. They're just too unpredictable. So for a long time, we said like there's just no way we're putting an LLM in front of the calculations that we do to provide to clients. What is changing though with the advent of agentic AI, however, is kind of understanding and recognizing what these different components are good at and leveraging those key strengths. So Gen AI is incredibly good at understanding and inferring intent from humans typing normal speech. It's what it's absolutely designed, and it's brilliant at it. It's not very good at doing maths and calculations, but if you can connect your kind of LLM to kind of be the thing that interacts with the people, then that's connected to a whole bunch of agents that are highly deterministic in what they do. They have a very predictable outcome every single time, and you can unit test it to the ends of the earth. That becomes really exciting, and that's why we're really now looking at this very, very carefully. Previously, we're kind of, well, you know, Gen AI, ChatGPT, it's kind of good, but it's hallucinations. But this agentic framework, I think, has enormous opportunities.
So that's something we've been using quite heavily, is in terms of looking after our customers. They communicate with us in various different ways, whether it's actually typing messages to our customer support team or performing actions on the applications that we use. The Gen AI is really good at understanding the intent, and we have agents that are specifically not necessarily trained but prompted to look for vulnerabilities, confusion, complaints, bugs, all these kind of things. So behind the scenes, they're doing a lot of work for us, but we can't just let it go and say, well, our LLM has not come up with a vulnerable client today, so we're not going to bother looking after anybody. There has to be someone overlooking it and monitoring it. And that has to, well, like, it can to an extent be another AI looking over the top of it, but there always has to be a human in the loop in that area.
And I think it's that, sorry, I'm just jumping in, but I think it's that the innovation that's happening is at such a speed that, you know, we were talking about LLMs, now it's SLMs, and actually, should we just create specific tasks for an agent to look at, and we'll only use that in an SLM rather than a big LLM? But then it's also the difference between what academia talk about the role of AI and then the business case use, where I think it's sort of blending some of the delineations that existed in the past, like agentic only being autonomous action, whereas I think from the business case uses that people have been talking about with me, it's very much they want the agent, and they want the agent to communicate with another agent, like under the A2A protocol. But actually, there's a level of an autonomy there for the agent, but it still has to go back up to a human for them to have the complete oversight.
Yeah, to the risk point. So yesterday, this topic came up at the roundtable. OpenAI moves away from the legal, finance, and medical advice. And I've got this personal experience that I know how to use AI, but back in days, I generated a legal document, like 30 pages, and to me, it was quite well, and I double check and triple check it with AI, asking it to criticize whether it's actually like make sense and so on and so forth. And it was like, yeah, sure, go on, and so on and so forth. But at the end, it became full rubbish when I checked it with legal department. So the responsibility of companies right now, especially in retail space, is to cover clients from this overconfidence, to guard them from being fooled by AI and this kind of pleasing behavior and many other flaws which AI has, especially in this finance area.
And I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges to this technology, is that we have to recognize we work in one of the most highly regulated industries in the world. And this technology comes with all sorts of risks that regulators are really not very happy with. The regulators are all over AI in the same way that practitioners are, but practical implementation of these things is really challenging to get these out on the trading floor, to be used by people. There's all sorts of hoops you need to jump through to make either internal compliance or risk or the regulators happy. You know, in the EU now, when I was talking to a bank the other day, they basically said all of, you know, the EU consider anything relating to AI as a model. Therefore, it has to go through our model control process. Every single agent potentially will need to go through model control. And that's a finite number of individuals who are used to looking at spreadsheets that do swap valuations, and now they've got to start assessing AI tools. So just the ability to actually get these things working in production, they do face significant headwinds, particularly in larger institutions.
So, with all of that said, what is AI doing to actually improve the customer experience, the trader on the street, the end user of the platforms, etc.? What is the interface that is providing them with the next level of value? And it's something that's very popular. Everyone
Well,
talks about AI, but what are they
yeah,
getting out of it?
the markets exist on the communication of information. And whether you're going back to carrier pigeons or you're talking about AI, it's the same thing as who has the information first has the edge. I think that the difference now is actually that edge can be much more personalized to you and what you're interested in. Again, across a multitude of different assets, time zones, regions, you name it. So your optionality is much broader. And the way that it was described to me yesterday by someone who was building a model, he said the difference is before I would be scraping social media for any negative connotations that, you know, Trump's just said X, therefore I need to trade ahead of that. He said, now I can chuck it into my model, and irrespective of what Trump comes out with, I'm not trying to preempt it. I allow the model to come back with what will be optimal based on the latest information. So it's rather than people chasing the news and reacting to news, you're responding to it, which is it's allowing people a little bit more latitude in the way that they can react to market events. But the downside with that is we're going to have a lot more market events. They're going to have a lot more momentum, a lot more volatility. And that means it's almost like step up or go home in some senses, which I then, you know, that's when the risk kicks in.
So personalization, for sure, is one of the aspects that you touched on, and synthesizing information into a format that enables rational decisions, perhaps, like you're saying, a model taking in
Yeah,
Trump's comments.
particularly if people need to assimilate lots of information very quickly in order to make a decision, whether it be a buy-side execution trader, a salesperson at a bank. You know, you've got tons and tons of sources of information. There's only so much they can look at. Their attention is finite. So, you know, these sorts of AI tools are very good at combining lots and lots and sources of data into something that is kind of much more focused, to allow a salesperson or indeed a manual trader or a voice trader to be able to react quickly and understand maybe cause and effect where they might not otherwise be able to see it. In terms of kind of the hardcore bit of kind of electronic trading, that's already pretty much all fully automated anyway. So you can't really automate it more. You might be able to kind of bring some of these inputs into the process, but yeah, particularly in kind of streamlining a lot of the workflows that are quite cumbersome at the moment in terms of an organization, that's where the things will have a huge amount of impact for sure.
There is one thing that we haven't talked about, which I think is another sort of incentive for AI, and that's really the move from T2 to T1 that's coming. And
So more of a settlement, trade
it's
settlement.
on the post-trade side, but it's interesting because it's probably going to change the way people trade. So if you go back to the early days of MiFID II, you couldn't trade unless you had an LEI. And everybody went absolutely bananas because they were just like, there's no way I can find this information out before I actually place a trade. Eventually, they did, and we moved to T2 settlement, and it wasn't a disaster, and business continued. I think what's going to happen with AI is, again, it goes back to the information that you can pull ahead of actually trading. Because rather than it speeding up existing workflows, which I think it was a sort of an interesting point that Guy was making, maybe you change the workflow entirely and you do things differently. And so at the moment, people are focusing on speeding up. But actually, what I think AI optimally will deliver is creating different ways of engaging with the market.
I think one of the things that we found is really good for as well is education and reducing the friction, particularly obviously with what we do, but with anything really. When I was younger and at school, I would be so scared to ask the teacher a question for the sake of me sounding stupid, which was probably going to happen, to be honest with you. But now I've got this thing that doesn't judge me, where I can ask a question, and providing it gives me the right answer, and so long as it's given the right guardrails, it can help educate people and reduce the friction into getting into certain things. So right early on, it can help out. But yeah, you've got to make sure, particularly with the FCA around, making sure you're not giving advice and it's guidance and it's correct. So you have to monitor that as well.
But a question for you, and you've obviously done this a lot within your organization. When we think about some of the tasks and roles that the people naturally think of AI as being quite able to do, you know, a lot of those are generally the ones that are done by more junior members of staff. Now, if you take those tasks away from those junior members of staff, how do you create the senior members of staff of tomorrow if you've taken the learning experiences away from those more junior people?
You give those tasks to AI as well? It's a really good question, and I think that's something that will shake out when we see more. I don't actually have an answer, so it's going to sound quite like a politician answering you, but I think we'll see that over time shake out as these things happen. As certain roles are augmented by AI, certain roles may be replaced by AI. Is that a barrier to allowing new leaders to come on board, new experts to come on board because they're blocked at the beginning? I wish I could give you a great answer to it, but unfortunately that's as good as I.
But isn't this similar to, so when I started my career in the city, I literally had a stack of pink tickets on one side and a stack of blue tickets on the other side, and that was my Friday evening, and it was really, really dull. So I still think that there are tasks that can be automated, even for junior staff, that would be incredibly helpful. And I mean, God forbid anybody still doing the pink tickets and the blue tickets. But it's things like chucking a firm's rules and regs around trading into a ChatGPT model that could actually prevent trades sort of hitting the blotter.
But it's more a question of judgment, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you have got a human in the loop and you're saying, right, we're deferring to an expert, that expert will be able to understand the nuance, understand the kind of the edge cases. If they haven't got the kind of the lived experience of seeing all those different situations that led to that judgment, then they haven't got the ability to discern what might be right or wrong. It feels like it's kind of choking off the kind of the working experiences that will allow these individuals to have that balanced view. Is that actually, you know what, the AI is wrong here, and I know that because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying, but I would say that it's just moved up to another level. So rather than you just having the learned experience on equities, you might need to have the learned experience of covering all asset classes, which you can't do, and all geographies, because you simply don't have the man hours. So you're going to have to take away the bottom layer each time. Now, I completely agree with you. It's culturally important within an organization to make sure that we don't lose the learning experience, and that's going to be personal responsibility as well as managerial responsibility.
This pattern has happened before, right?
Sorry to.
Yeah,
Ihar.
please. So to me, intelligence and knowledge becomes commodity. So, and the more and more we see that rather than investing time into learning some things, you need to understand the concept, like first principle knowledge. and so the interface becomes different. So if before it was more like books and network and so on and so forth, so right now it's more like it's multimodal. So you can educate yourself in a specific domain, specifically for the needs of at the moment you need at the moment. Yeah. So and it changes the interface you build for the retail clients, for instance, as well. So the way they communicate with the platform, the way they educate themselves. So yeah, one side is a huge amount of information when you plug into this, but the other side, which is a fun one, is to how to provide this information to clients, how they communicate to. So it might be a voice, it might be a combination of text and images. It's like the creativity is insane there in this field.
David, sorry, I cut you off there.
Fine. I was just thinking on the point about it taking jobs and then perhaps people not being trained up afterwards. I feel like that's happened in the past with other automations before AI existed, in that things have come along for centuries that have automated jobs, and then the world adapts to that. And we still have experts. You don't necessarily have to go through the same path to become an expert on something.
I was talking to a lady on the train platform up to London this morning, and her daughter is applying for jobs at the moment. She was talking to someone who I think does graduate recruitment for IBM, and for the specific office they were talking about, last year they had 400 positions. This year they've got 12, and it's a huge change to the job market.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I'm not entirely sure that we're training children today at the skills that will matter in terms of critical thinking, that kind of thing. But there's that period of adjustment that we're going through. And again, a slight aside, but there was a woman who was interviewed on Radio 4 where she was a novelist. The AI wrote a similar novel to her completely within like nanoseconds. But the difference was, she said, it's 90% good. It's not that 10%.
Yeah, so
And as an industry, we get paid for the 10%.
yeah, there's a very minor difference between superb and absolutely excellent, but it's that little difference that makes
It's
something
regurgitation.
right.
So ChatGPT can give you information. It's still dependent on you, the information you pick and the line that you go down. That's why I think, I take Guy's point. It's going to be tough for people coming up in the industry, but we will adapt and we will evolve.
Yeah, we went through the Luddites, 130, 140 years ago, smashing, spinning jennies. So, at least we've got a little bit better in terms of our activities and technology. I'm just going to open it up. We got a lot of people here in the auditorium, and I can see a lot of people focused on listening to everybody, and I've been seeing some nodding heads, etc., and some cases some shaking heads. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to pose to our panel here? If you have, please raise your hand.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Can you maybe you can introduce yourself?
Sure.
and then
This is Vahid. I'm a film producer and a private investor. I have tried various publicly available AIs and even trying to jailbreak them and get to the developer modes. And I'm not really impressed with the word intelligence, to be honest. And it's full of mistakes, and it's very dangerous to rely on that. Just an observation. But I have a question for you. Specifically in field of trading, is there any AI tool that you find fascinating that can really do something interesting, even though it needs the observation of a human being to operate it? Is there any tool available today that you would consider to use?
Well, I'll just step in here, given that I work for TipRanks, and it would be really very, very, very wrong of me when my boss sees this video later to not mention my B2C platform, which is tipranks.com, which specializes in the retail investor and synthesizing complex data into sound bites that are actionable. And especially one of the things that we discussed in the panel that is very relevant to our company is data integrity. And I think the panels will all agree that AI is only as good as what you feed it. And if you're feeding your AI nonsense, it's going to spit out nonsense. So perhaps our platform, and with that, I'm going to pass it back to the panel now that I've shamelessly plugged.
Yeah. So what I find interesting is and useful as well is vibe coding tools. So not only for vibe coding only, like Cursor, for instance, because Cursor provides an agentic interface, so you can provide instructions for different engines to behave, and then it just orchestrates. And by these vibe coding tools, you can generate interfaces, you can work out documents, you can work out code, many tools, many things. And what's best right now, those tools integrate different models. So you can compare different outputs from different models and actually understand which one works better for you. Because before it was like OpenAI ChatGPT is best of the best. But right now it's like Opus 4.5 is quite good. Sometimes niche models like Cursor has their own model to operate with the data they've got, the index data, the knowledge they've got under the hood. And sometimes it provides you better answer when you need to rely on your internal knowledge, which is provided by this tool. So.
In terms of experimentation, there's now some professors, so they're attached to Turing Institute, or there's actually École Politique in France. There's also a professor from Harvard. They're starting to put out some ideas on, it's literally on LinkedIn. If you follow them, they'll put in a prompt that you can use, that you can trial. I think it is the experimentation, isn't it? It's not like there isn't one model. I think that it's really now about, if you have the ability to experiment, try it. But again, it's whatever's comfortable for an individual firm. Going back to Guy's points earlier, in some senses, this is more advantageous for the retail market and the hedge fund market, because they're not encumbered with the same constraints that, unfortunately, MiFID II investment firms, large broker dealers, they have limitations as to what they can experiment with correctly. Whereas I think a retail, you can literally start having a play.
I think we might have time for one or two more. One more. And
oh, thank you very much. I didn't want to steal the other chap's place. My name's Sam from Liquidity Finder. I don't know how many other people received this morning, but I had an email from OpenAI saying there was a security breach. And